forensics. I'm usually the guy brought in to break all the things. I'm pretty good at that. I love everything from social engineering to, getting into different kind of networks. So I've actually done a lot of cases, and I'm going to talk about one of my cases that I've worked with law enforcement and stuff over the years with insider threats. You've got my Twitter handle right there. If you have any questions or want to email me, you can email me as well, and we can always chat. So I always like talking about the threat landscape a little bit. I wish we had Balcar to help us when we need help. But, the threat landscape out there is, crazy. So when we see stuff like this, right? So here's a hotel. I was given a talk a couple years ago, and the manager made a point to me when I checked in and saying, hey, you have a card, and be sure to use that card to get to your floor. I was like, oh, okay, they got decent security. And I get into the elevator, and guess what I see? I see a permanent card attached to the elevator door here. And of course, being who I am, I definitely had to try it. And of course, I could get to any floor that I wanted. Being a magnetic card, going to be really easy to clone. I actually didn't have a cloner that day, but if I did, it would have been really, really easy to clone that for sure. You definitely don't want to, this is the insider blocking their boss from seeing what they want to do for sure. I know we've all heard of BYOD. This is BYOFS. This is bring your own fire extinguisher. Probably don't want to be in this building when this goes off for sure. And how did the guy putting the railing there actually say, you know what, this is a good idea. Let's block this door. Probably not good. This is hopefully there's no one from Cisco, but this is your network protected by Cisco. Just kidding. So, we've heard of, people propping open doors and stuff, and people have been able to walk in. Perfect example right there. And then we have, of course, people leave their codes out there for everybody to get to, which is really, really tough to see. And just a quick one. This one was the one on the right was taken at a security conference a couple years ago, if you can believe that. Definitely watch out for where you charge your cell phone and who's actually providing that electricity or electrons going through that. You never know who the insider is. So what does Wikipedia say? What is the insider threat, right? It is that malicious threat to any organization. It could be employees, former employees, contractors, business associates, contractors that are out, working, and they've got higher access than everybody else, right? They can just walk through the front door, which is kind of crazy. One of the things I like to say, if you ever get a chance to read The Art of War, read The Art of War. There's a lot of stuff in there that you can use in day-to-day, cyber hygiene, cyber security. And I like this one particular quote, right? If you know your enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. But if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer defeat. And I think that second sentence is so true, right? You've got to know who the enemy is, whether it's a nation state attack, it's an insider threat, it could be, what about hardware failing? It could be a threat as well. So I think it's a very good saying in relation to cybersecurity. So what does Hollywood say about threats? So I'll give everybody a second to look at this picture, but it's, what was this guy doing? What kind of insider threat was he? He was doing IP theft for sure. He was trying to steal the dino DNA, so to speak. I don't know if you watch this. I know a lot of people watch this in the U.S. for sure. And again, thanks for everybody for having me today in beautiful Vancouver. I wish I was there. I'm actually at a racetrack called Lime Rock Park, if you want to Google that, in Lakeview, Connecticut today. So in Mr. Robot, he was trying to do sabotage, right? He was trying to knock out the building so they couldn't restore all the data, the financial data. Then we got this guy. So what do we think this guy was doing? Well, this guy was trying to do fraud. He was actually trying to do the Superman 3 fraud by every transaction siphoning off like hundredths of a penny. And if they did it, multiple transactions, well, of course they messed up, and it was subtracting like dollars at a time off every transaction. Then we got this guy. So what do you think this guy was doing? Well, this is Ed Snowden. So this is actually from the movie Ed Snowden. So was this guy doing espionage against the U.S. government, or was he a whistleblower showing what was being done? It is very controversial even to this day, for sure. to even think about that. So, and I'll talk about a case that was similar in a commercial space anyways, where, you know, was it a whistleblower or wasn't it a whistleblower? So I've got this picture. This is a tweet from a couple years ago, and I always find it interesting because I do a lot of like hardware hacks, you know, and stuff, and research on reverse engineering of different kinds of hardware. And it was interesting when I saw this, is because this was a daughter board. This was in a Cisco switch that they sold several hundred of them. But if you look closely at it, that is a cyber espionage device, and that device was actually talking back to China. For different things, right? And they could look for anything, that implant. So I always ask, you know, especially if I'm there live, is how many people have actually taken apart their equipment before they put it online? And very few people do that, right? I mean, I know I do. When I get new equipment, I'm going to pull it apart. I want to see, is there some kind of implant? This implant was easy to find for sure, but there's definitely other implants that are going to be very extremely difficult to find. Now, you couldn't protect yourself against this. If this was in your network, it's game over. So you have to be very vigilant around supply chain and other things and where you're getting equipment. So some of the stuff that's in the news, of course, this is an insider data theft during remote work. Of course, that huge during these last couple of years for sure. Then you got this one, this in particular insider was sentenced for sabotaging PPE shipments. It's like, it's not just cyber, it's across the board. Where else are these insiders messing with our stuff? So this is a real bad one. This is all about banking. So this is in May of last year, almost a year ago. So the cipher was looking for insiders at Bank of America, Chase Bank, Wells Fargo. They were trying to get access to someone who could basically authorize transactions. They could hack into the banks. They were trying to send transactions across them, and then they would say, okay, if we're going to deal with amounts over 200,000 to several million, and they would give whoever they could get a figure, an 8-figure salary, weekly 7 to 8 figures a week that they could run through there. Crazy time. And they were going to get definitely a cut, right? 40 to 50%. So whoever could do that was going to make a ton of money and definitely going to go to jail for a very long time. So here's one. This is a former IT admin. I like this guy. He really was innovative. This is several years ago. Not only did he leave a back door, but he accessed his company's network over 700 times in 1 year, which I find, you know, kind of amusing because, I mean, that's averaging. He was connecting and doing something on their network 2.3 times a day, every day for a year. I guess he didn't take off for Christmas and New Year's or his birthday. He kept working. And they didn't discover him until a year into it, which is kind of crazy. Here's another one. This is a Road IT. This is back in 2018. If you ever get a chance to read this story, it's pretty interesting. And I like to say going off the rails because it had to deal with Canadian train switches. And he was shutting them down. He did get a year and a day behind bars for that as well. Here's a story about a terminated employee. What he did was hack his way back in, and he faced, and this is all the way back in 2009. He actually compromised over 1,000 servers across that network. So you have to be vigilant across, you know, logins, data transfers. You know, it's a lot to watch, and we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So what about this? This is the easy stuff, right? This is at an insider job at a medical clinic. They were actually taking their phone and just screenshotting their little iPads and their computers because they weren't allowed to print. They weren't allowed to do certain things on those computers. And then this person was selling that data. Very hard to catch. I mean, they actually caught them through security cameras. So this is always bad, right? This is a couple years ago. This particular company's employee sold customer info to tech support scammers. So we've all seen those tech support scammers. But now if they've got more inside information, man, it makes their more credible, right? When they call you and say, hey, I'm with such and such, and we noticed that you own such and such product, they can get more specific in their phishing attempts to try to scam you and get into your computer. DLP, the 3-letter word. It's tough. DLP is very tough to get built correctly, I would say. Across, I haven't seen a really great install of DLP because there's just so many ways to get around it. You can see this particular company was suing these 4 former employees for stealing company data. And they didn't catch them with their DLP. They actually caught them after the fact because it was several salespeople that was stealing customer information to go to a new company. Now, here's an interesting one. This is when the FBI arrested a NSA contractor for leaking secrets to the media. Well, yeah, she's all sitting here looking like she's getting ready to smile. Hey, I'm having a great day. But they actually caught her because she couldn't send the information and she couldn't put it on a USB drive. So what she would do is print it and actually walk it out the front door to give it to the media. Well, once they were onto her, they actually did the drop. They grabbed the paper from her. And what most people don't know, for a long, long, long time now, laser printers and stuff will print microdots in very, very small sections. So you could actually take a piece of paper, and if you have a really, really good microscope, you can actually find this stuff. And it's got the serial number of the printer. If it's got a date and time, it's got several metadata. And that's how they tracked her down. Because they could track exactly what printer it was that she was printing from. So another one, and of course you got Steve Harvey looking like, what happened? So this is a rogue system admin. They shut down and deletes core files on the day he was fired. So what do you do with that? Do you know, if you've got a rogue admin or someone that's disgruntled employee, you know, how do we prepare for that? Do we have good backups? Do we have a process in place? Say, okay, you know what? A week before you leave or 2 weeks, we're going to shut your access off. You know, I know it's hard to believe if someone just walks in, walks out, but it's definitely, you've got to have some policies and procedures and be able to look at some of that stuff. So little case that I worked on several years ago, this particular insider, this was at we'll call them a chemical company. So they had, and this was multiple players, multiple insider threats. It all started with one of their salespeople leaving and wanted to go work for the competitor. And these 2 competitors only sell the same stuff, you know. So it's very guarded secret of how they produce their, you know, chemicals and whatnot. And what was interesting though is I was at this site doing a security audit, actually doing some pen testing for them, and the IT director came up to me and says, hey, you know, we have an issue that we want you to look at. And I said, well, that's interesting. I've got an issue I need to talk to you about. And so he's proceeded to tell me, it's like, hey, we had an employee or somebody from the outside send an email inside our company with our employee list. They actually knew our group names, and they sent all the salary information spreadsheets of what everyone was making and bonuses and everything to everybody in the company. So it really caused a stir. At the same time, on one of my laptops, because when I do pen testing, I actually carry 2 laptops. One I actually set up as, quote, a honeypot, just in case, see what's happening on the network. And it kept getting scanned, and plus my main computer kept getting scanned. So we started tracing it, and we were in the IT department, and it was actually somebody that was just 2 cubicles over, because we traced the wire down to the wire. And they were scanning our boxes, trying to look for vulnerabilities. It's like, what are they trying to do? And so when I approached the IT director about this, and he goes, man, that's funny, but I don't believe it's that guy. Well, I don't know why he would do it. He's probably just goofing around or something. It's probably not real. It's like, okay. So we proceeded to investigate the case. And of course, the scans got more and more frequent on the boxes. And during our investigation, I learned that there was a laptop from the salesperson that we wanted to do forensics on and so forth like that. But I had a sneaky suspicion about this particular insider and IT admin. So we actually set up a little sting. Their main office is 20 minutes away from the plant that we were at. And so we said, hey, can you please come to the HQ, pick up this laptop and bring it back so you can re-image it. What he didn't know is that we had already forensically taken a copy of the hard drive. We took the original hard drive out, cloned it to just another hard drive, put it back in the machine, and we had Private Eye, along with one of our other guys, follow this guy out, and it took them over 45 minutes to make that 20-minute drive. Well, I got a call later that day as soon as the guy showed up from our PI and stuff. And it says, hey, you'll never believe this. I have pictures of this guy in a parking lot with his laptop open, and he's wiping out files. And we saw all the evidence because we could compare the two hard drives. And that's what he was doing. He was actually covering for the sales guy. So fortunately, we caught this guy. We got the sales guy. We actually worked with the other company, and they said, hey, we don't want any part of this, and we'll help you in the investigation. Well, it turns out both people were caught, and it was not a good situation for anybody. And actually, they went to jail for several years for stealing information, especially formulas and sales information, everything else. Bad stuff. So here's my WTF moment for the day. So of course you've heard this story about Anthony Landowski. He was trying to steal trade secrets from Waymo and give them to Uber, which is the guy that's smiling on the left, which is the old CEO of Uber, which is Travis. And it's interesting, I currently work at a company, VMware, and our software actually was the one that was used in this. It was when I was with Carbon Black. They bought Carbon Black. And we could tell exactly how many files, where they files, and what specific USB drive they stole to store all these files. And that's when Google testified in court, they testified, said, yep, this is the software we use, this is how we found out, and and all that kind of stuff. So fast forward a little bit. So he did finally plead guilty to stealing Google trade secrets, and as of a year and a half ago, so to get 30 months in prison for it. So not a good thing. Here's my honorable mention today for insider threat. So this U.S. employee, he actually outsourced his job to China, but he did it in an interesting way. So when they worked remotely, they have to have RSA tokens. So they, it changes the 6-digit number every minute. And what he would do is he'd get that and FedEx it to somebody in China, and they would VPN in. And what he would do, he would sit there, watch cat videos on YouTube, look at eBay, Reddit, and everything else. And this other guy did his job, and he would just pay this guy to do his job. And he got away with it for quite some time. Just crazy, crazy stuff out there for sure. I love this one. This is my best one for sure. This man hacks the jail computer network to try to get his friend released early. When I made some inquiries into this, when I said, why didn't y'all just let him come pick up the guy instead of arresting him? So they went out and arrested him, this engineer that did this. They arrested him at his house. But I was like, man, I would have let him come to the prison, like pick up his friend. That way you can get both of them and just put them both in prison. So yeah, funny times. So some of the stats out there that you may or may not know. So insider threats pose one of the biggest security risks out there. So over 91% of IT and security professionals feel they're vulnerable. And I always ask, I was like, why do you feel vulnerable? It's like, and usually it's the visibility. We don't have visibility into whatever this threat could be, whether they're stealing data, they have the wrong access, and I'm all about, you've got to have that visibility. You've got to have that audit capability to be able to look at not only who's logging in, so you can catch more than just quote insiders, right? But as people are trying to, whatever attacker it is, whether it's a nation state or whatever, is going to be doing, lateral movement across the network, and you can catch them for sure. So, Core 42 is a couple years old. I haven't seen a new one list for this, but, over almost 70% of security leaders say DLP cannot stop insider threat, and they're true. I know in my pen testing days, I've beaten like lots and lots of DLP, either trying to get credit cards past it or just get gobs of data past DLPs for one way or another. It can happen. Encryption is usually the #1 answer to get around those, unfortunately, because you would have to be able to decrypt it on the fly to look for that stuff. So the other thing is, also over 60% involve employees planning to leave. Just if you're going to leave, just leave. Don't try to mess with the employer. It's just crazy. Just ask them for trouble. So that was one of the biggest thing where they saw, everything from stealing sensitive data. That was the #1 thing, to getting privileges that they shouldn't, to getting data, and even sabotage down to 5% of that that were doing that were trying to sabotage. And that's what most people think. Oh, it's an insider threat, they're going to sabotage me. But it's the data theft that you really have to think about. It's like, what is my IP, right? What am I keeping? What's valuable for my company? If we're selling widgets, it could be the design of that widget. It could be the process of the molds to make it. Everything else you have to keep and track of. So what are some of the things that we're missing, right? Everything from insufficient data protection strategies and solutions. Definitely the biggest one is increasing number of devices with access to sensitive data. As we've seen over the last couple of years, that you've got this strain on, SOC teams around the world going, man, everybody's remote. I've got no data island. It's getting hit from 500 different directions. That's kind of crazy, right? You've got everything from the mobile side, right? Lots of mobile stuff. You've got a lot of machines that are behind a wireless network that's at home with a home router with no security on it. You wouldn't believe how many homes have default passwords for their routers. You've seen the attacks against D-Link, Linksys, and so forth, that it was default password. They never changed it. I think cable companies are some of the worst, where they don't do good job of, hey, you might need to reset that password, and that's what should do. So if you're starting to look at some of the new things, that software should be changing that password as soon as you get it. I know it might not be super convenient, but it has to be done so we can get this stuff updated and stop some of these attacks for sure. So I've seen, I know at my house, I run 5 different networks, and one of them is a honeypot. And I'm looking at sideband off of my internet connection where, okay, what attacks are coming at me? So I can either make sure my networks are protected. I've got some air gap stuff for my lab and so forth. But it's amazing. The scans every single day that I'm getting hit by. I'm still seeing internal blue out there, believe it or not. And lots of the ransomware, lots of different, looking for, different ports, 135, 139, 445, looking for those ports. I've seen quite a few DNS hijack attempts too lately, because I also spoof a DNS server, trying to pull DNS records out. Then you've got, more employees, more contractors, partners accessing it. If we look at the attack against Target several years ago, it was the partner that got breached first, and then they used that VPN connection to get back to the main network. Again, the network wasn't segregated. They got into one part of the network, which got them right into the POS systems. Crazy. Definitely, we're seeing this increasing use of cloud apps and infrastructure. How is that being tested? How is it being verified that, hey, I know who did it, when they did it, and possibly why they did it, of trying to get access to data? That's huge. That I'm seeing a lot of different companies out there that, hey, we've got this great app, but okay, what are you doing with my data? Is it segregated from everyone else's on your cloud platform or not? Is it encrypted? Do I own the encryption key? Do you own the encryption key? Can I pen test it? These are some of the questions you should be asking your providers if you're going to some of these cloud instances to see about that. We've seen a lot of attacks recently on especially APIs and Docker containers, especially any of the container stuff, because we know it goes up and down, and they have to attack fast, get in, get out as quickly as possible, because we know that Dockers can just be wiped out, restarted, and they've lost their connection. So we're seeing a lot of that. And that's one of the things that keeps me up at night, if so to speak, is the use of APIs and how unsecure a lot of them are. They're like, there's no visibility into, oh, well, we have it open, but there's no auth. We just give our API out for people to use. It's like, you've got to have some type of auth and some RBAC in there for sure. So some food for thought for today. And again, if there's any questions, please feel free, post your questions in there. They'll stop me and I can answer the questions live for you. I'd be happy to do that as well. I definitely love being live. We've looked at some regulations, and I really like the GDPR actually, because as you can see from this several years ago, is actually they saw a huge decrease in insider threats, so it fell by over 8% in the past 12 months in the UK, while the US grew 8% that they've seen on the insider threat perspective. So it's interesting. How do we get that perspective here in the US and and get some of these controls in place to where we can alleviate, probably not 100% for sure, because there's always a will or there's a way, right? To get better visibility, push some things in process where I'm not changing my security posture, except making it better, right? But not messing with my processes and my business as well. So definitely some good news. This is a good one. This was going to be a huge insider threat case. So a couple bad guys basically talked to a Tesla employee, and they said, hey, we'll pay you, I believe it was $500,000 to insert this thumb drive into the Tesla network, right, at the Gigafactory. Thank goodness the employee says, nope. Or he didn't really say much. What he did is contact security. They got with the FBI. They set up a sting, and then they were able to catch these guys. Crazy stuff. I mean, that's a whole lot of money just to insert a thumb drive. I worked a case several years ago as well. It was an insurance case, and I got called by an insurance company at a bank, and they didn't understand. They're in a high-rise building, and they were losing servers and switches and routers and different hardware that was just walking away, and they could never pin it on anybody. They kept thinking it was the IT team, but they never did anything with it. It actually turned out to be a third party, and I actually pretended to be part of the cleaning crew for about 2 weeks until we finally caught who was doing it. They were actually, because the cleaning crew had access to every single room. With their card key access, they could just swipe it and they would clean out the trash cans in the server room, which I can guarantee you now there's no trash and no one's allowed in the server room. But they would actually take something out of the box, put it in their trash can, and wheel it right out the front door and go into like the service elevator. Well, back in those hallways, there was no cameras or anything, so the bank couldn't figure out who was stealing it. So luckily, they did catch the lady that was doing it, and she turned evidence to the cyber gang that was actually doing the thefts with her, and they paid her basically $500 every time she walked out of the building with a piece of hardware. So crazy stuff. So some of the stuff that you should be reading and kind of looking at, this one is put on by the National Counterintelligence and Security Center. I've got the link at the bottom. And again, my slides will be available. So if you can't write this down fast enough, you can look for this insider threat mitigation for U.S. critical infrastructure entities. It's actually a good reading for looking at some of the mitigation you can do against not just critical infrastructure, but your own entities. I mean, definitely if you have critical infrastructure, I think everyone has some type of critical infrastructure that they've got to keep up. So that's really good. It just got published last October. So it's at the dni.gov. So you can look up insider threat mitigation for that. Another one is the insider threats and commercial espionage for economic and national security impacts. This is from the INSA. This is for their insider threat subcommittee as well. So this one was published last year, May, I believe, 05, yeah. So another good one to read also. It can give you some of those steps and some of the things you need to be watching out for sure when dealing with insider threats. So I know my talk is kind of quick, but before I give you Dave's top 10, I'll actually tell you one more insider threat story here. So several years ago, got a call from one of my business partners, and he goes, hey, I've got a customer in such and such city that said they think they're being bugged, and they think they have someone that's basically breached their network, can read all their emails and everything. They think all their communications are affected as well. So it's like, okay, I'll talk to the guy. So didn't have a phone number, but the guy called me from a burner phone, and it was the CIO. And so we met the guy. Actually, he wanted to meet at like 1 o'clock in the morning at basically an empty parking lot. Of course, I brought some bodyguard for that, because we trusted the guy, but you just never know, right? After we definitely did our due diligence before we had this meeting. Super nice guy. He's like, Dave, we think all my comms are compromised. That's the only reason he wanted to meet, to where it wasn't at the office or anything like that. And what was interesting though is, so we formulated a plan. They thought they knew who was doing it. It was an insider. It was the network administrator, the main guy, and he had been there for almost 10 years. And so we set up a sting. We actually would sit there. We got at his computer. We put spyware, keylogger, and screen grab software on his machine and tied it directly to the CIO's machine. So the CIO could see what's happening, but no one else, not even us. So we actually installed it at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we walked out. But we also, had to reboot his computer. We covered our tracks, and thinking what this guy was doing based on some other factors, we actually turned off all the computers in front of his office and rebooted all of them. Simulate a power failure, basically. He came in the very next day, got on his computer. The very first thing he did, he logged in, and he went directly to his app logs, his Windows logs. He looked at the system log, he looked at the login log, and the application log. He wanted to see if anything was installed or anything that was logged. Luckily for him, he didn't find anything, because otherwise this would have been a short trip. We cleared our tracks so he couldn't see anything, and did some other file date modifications as well. And then he proceeded to get out, and then we didn't see anything. Then he went out to look at the computers in front of him, and he noticed, oh, looks like it was a power failure. So he came and sat back down. Then the next thing he did, he spent the next 30 minutes reading everyone's email. And he opened up the email of the top 40 people in the company, everybody from the attorneys to the CIO to the CEO and accounting. He had literally 40 people that he was going through the emails. And what he was doing is taking those and copying them and sticking them on thumb drive. As soon as that happened, the CIO saw that. He called us and says, hey, I think we got this guy. So we left the hotel, rushed back over there, and they already pulled him out. They had him downstairs waiting for law enforcement to show up so he could get arrested. Law enforcement showed up. They had their case put together with the company attorney, and this guy definitely did not want to say a word. And I was just curious, so I asked him, I was like, hey, can I spend a couple minutes with him? I'd like to see if he'll talk to me and tell me what the deal was. So I did. I got to talk to him for a few minutes, and it was interesting. He actually told me what was going on. He was actually selling these emails to competitors, people that were getting acquired. So this one particular company, is a financial company, was acquiring other little financial companies. And he was selling it so they could raise their bids, basically, so they could try to get more money. And he did this for over a year. Now, he sold information to a little over a dozen different companies. How much do you think he made out of this? And we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar financial company that was acquiring others. Believe it or not, he only made about $50,000 out of this. The transactions were not very big and all that kind of stuff. It was a real shame because, talking to the CIO, he was a super nice guy. He'd go to all the barbecues and all that kind of stuff. But he threw his life away. So yeah, he ended up getting sent to jail for almost 9 years on that. So not good times for that guy, for sure. So I know I brought up a couple cases where I've had some rogue admins and stuff like that. Pretty rare. Most of my cases don't deal on that side. They deal on the other side, where it's usually just regular employees that are, either getting privilege escalation or, stealing data they shouldn't get. So that's what we normally see. Or it's the sabotage.
Hey, David. Sorry to interrupt you. It looks like there was a hiccup in the system and you got muted. Is there any chance you can just verify that you can unmute yourself?
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I think with some insider threat here, we must have accidentally just got you on mute.
Somebody muted me. Okay.
Yeah, there was a hiccup. I just saw that the live broadcast stopped for a moment, and then all of a sudden you were muted. But you're good to go. You might need to back up. I think it was around 9 that you went out.
Okay.
My apologies for that.
No problem. No problem. Thanks for catching that. I swear I didn't touch the the keyboard. My hands are here, like Vegas hands. So we'll go through this real quick. So again, always treat your network as hostile. Always assume breached. Definitely no one's immune to malware. We've seen that. We've seen all the crazy malwares. My key thing here is have that post-breach strategy ready. So I've seen plenty of customers that don't have that strategy ready. So they're scrambling at the last minute. Have that, test it, saying, okay, guys, we're going to simulate a breach today. We've lost such and such data. What do we do? Do we, get the help desk? Do we get the users? Do we get the attorneys involved? Where's our backups? All that kind of stuff. Definitely don't forget about the insider threat. I know this is a family show, so I'll repeat one more time. We'll come back to number 2. Know your network. And I say that because I worked a case with the city government several years ago that when we got in and I started asking my general 3 questions, I asked, where are the DNS logs, where's your backups, and where's the bathroom? But on that case, I also asked, what's the network look like? Where's your ingress and egress points? And they actually brought me a map that was like 6 years old that was not even valid, wasn't even current, nothing. So we actually had to go through and find all the stuff for them. And that put us behind a couple days for sure. So back to log everything. And I don't mean every single packet, but the metadata. So we know your DHCP, we know your DNS request, and have that unfiltered data. I'm a strong believer in the 30, 60, 90 day rule. So have all that metadata for 30 days, chop off a piece for 60 days. So you keep part of it for 60 and then so forth to 90. It's really important. It's all about that visibility because you're not going to catch nation state attackers versus insiders versus anything else if you don't have that visibility. Definitely train your security staff. Doing events like B-Sides, which is awesome. Definitely go to those. You get great word of mouth. You get great training. You get great content. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed this content today. Number 3, security awareness for everyone. And I don't mean the click, hey, HR, yep, I'm quote certified for that, but real security awareness. And one of my friends I know did a great one for a bank they were doing. And they walked in with a bunch of balloons and a cake and went to one of the floors. There's a big high rise, like 12 stories, and found this lady. And everyone thought, oh, it's, so-and-so's birthday. It wasn't her birthday. What she had done is reported a phishing attempt that turned out to be real. It was a real phishing attempt to try to steal money from the bank. And she reported it. And so that was part of the security awareness was, hey, here's a cake, here's some balloons. And everyone noticed really, really quick. So the day before that happened, they were only getting like 40, of thousands of employees, only like 40 phishing emails sent to the IT department. Very few. After that day, they got over 400 a month. It was just like boom, 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 boom. And they were much, much better. Their chances of getting hit by some of these phishing went way, way down.
Hey, Dave, got a question for you from an anonymous user. He wanted to know if you have evidence that an organization you've done business with has had your data stolen or leaked and you identify the individual, what is a good route to pursue them?
The best route is call law enforcement is number 1. So save whatever evidence you have, and that way they can make a case. Because unfortunately, if you give it all to the company, they might wash it under the sink and say, oh, well, okay, yeah, we paid that guy off to get rid of him, so we won't leak our data. My thing is bring in law enforcement, whether it's a cyber task force or whatnot, to do that. That's definitely going to be the best, and make sure you Unless they tell you otherwise, keep a copy of what evidence you have as well. Thanks. Great question. Great question. Awesome. So we're, and still, please ask any questions you want. Definitely number 2 is patch, again. And then always refer back to number 7. You should be laughing right now. That's my programming joke for the day. So I've got you in this infinite loop. So know your network, log everything, train your staff, and security awareness. Boom, 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 for sure. And number 1, I'm sorry, Ryan Reynolds was not here today. You've got Dave Balcar. I do really, really appreciate it for being here today. If you have any more questions, please, I know we've got about 12 minutes or so. So please let me know. I'll stay on for a few minutes and answer any and all questions. Again, thanks to the whole great B-Side staff for having me out today.
It's been an awesome talk, David. I got to tell you, it's just been great stuff to think about. You know, insiders are always they say the biggest weakness in security, but they can also be your biggest asset. If you were to look at it from the other side of it, what would you think are the top 3 things? You give your top 10. If you had to think about this from an organization, a security person has to come back to work and say, listen, we need to start doing these other things. Is it really about making sure you're able to monitor them? Is it the ability of educating them? What would you feel would be the first thing you would want them to do?
Yeah, and I don't want to put that false narrative out there. You know, a lot of people go, oh, well, security team's watching everything we do. You can watch a lot of stuff with metadata without infringing on anyone's privacy or, you know, trying to, quote, spy on them. So my biggest thing is get visibility, have that metadata so I can see what applications are running, what data is going around my network, that kind of stuff. But the other thing is, and you hit the nail right on the hammer there, was that security awareness and that training of my users. So they understand the importance of, hey, we have valuable data. We don't want it to leave. You like your job. Everyone is in this together. How do we protect that data? And that's big. So I've seen lots in the last couple of years where companies that have taken that approach have been way more successful, because now it's not like you've got someone tattling on someone else, but if they see some wrongdoing, man, they're going to be quick to point it out and says, hey, I think Joe is stealing, you know, whatever, and Sally, and giving it to Sally, who's selling it to somebody else, or, you know, whatnot, because it's good for everyone. Because if someone destroys the company, guess what? Everyone loses.
Right. I think Mubix kind of covered it really well in his keynote when he was talking about one of the things is, while we can try to put, you know, security DNA in the organization, not everyone are security people. You can't expect them to be that. In a lot of cases, when we look at the lateral movements and how it's happening inside the organization, there are fundamental security principles that are typically at play here, like least privilege not being applied. The secretary doesn't need access to the database server. Why are we applying that? We can go and say it's the secretary's fault for plugging in that USB key. But the reality is the best security systems that are out there, and the policies and anything you can put in place, are the ones that employees never see unless they do something they're not supposed to, at which case that's when the security systems should be kicking in. Education's important, but we can't rely on the people to always get it right. They're the biggest weakness in the organization, but they can only be our biggest assets if we're being responsible in applying everything else that's there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'll give you a prime example. So I worked a lot with hospitals. So, you know, hospitals, especially down in Hollywood, Los Angeles, have a lot of VIP customers that generally do not come under their name. They're always under pseudonyms. And they have certain rooms and floors where, you know, people, they don't want this movie star or whatever, they don't want that information to get out. And I've helped them put policies in place in monitoring, so that way, you know, a floor nurse on the 3rd floor can't see what's happening on the 4th floor. So if she gets on the computer, she, oh, I want to see, I know Britney Spears is here. So, you know, she goes by, you know, Roger Rabbit or something, whatever name she chooses. But you see what I'm saying? If the software's monitoring for that, it's like, okay, if you're a nurse on the 3rd floor, that's the only patients that you should be accessing, right? If I access something else out of that, I need an alarm bell to go off. I need to be able to see that and say, you know what? that nurse shouldn't be doing that. And we actually caught a couple nurses in Hollywood doing that, that were selling information. One person was in the records department, so she had access to everything, but her cousin worked up on this particular floor in this hospital, and they were sending notes back and forth, comparing and trying to sell that information to the tabloids. But luckily, the system we put in place, which did not infringe on anybody's job, they never even knew it was there. But when the time came, they could, they could flag it, right? They could flag who's accessing this quote VIP's information.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, good talk.
All right, let me check and see if there's any last minute questions. One moment. So there's a question here. Do you have any suggestions for public templates or a source where someone can refer to start drafting an insider threat incident playbook?
Oh, that's good. I don't have any like resource off the top of my head. I'd be happy, if you get my email or DM me and Twitter, I'd be happy to give you some stuff for sure. I think the biggest thing on Insider Playbook is the same as any malicious actor. It doesn't matter. It's just they've got the inside piece, right? The biggest thing is that the visibility into the metadata that I keep talking about, whether it's, if they're getting DHCP or they've got VDI, how do we capture who was on that VDI session, when they did it, what USB drives are being used, that kind of stuff. That's going to be some of the biggest playbooks. But you need to have some criteria as well. And that criteria is really going to center around, okay, what is our IP? You've got to be able to identify the keys to the castle. So if I don't know what they are, I'm not going to know what to watch anyways. I can't just watch everything all the time, but I need to watch that very specific data. It's like, okay, this data, only these people should have access to it. Whether that's the accounting system, only the accountants should have access to that. That's going to be the biggest thing in quote a playbook, right? Is to look at those kind of scenarios and say, okay, if X, Y, and Z happens and it shouldn't belong to that person, then we need to take a look at it. And then the next step is going to go, okay, now I can open up an investigation. You know what? And if it's benign, boom, I throw it away and keep going. But if it's not, you've got to get to that point to where what is going to set off your red flags in your environment versus anybody else's to be opening those investigations.
That's great. I also just posted a book title for someone if you want to look. It's an older book. I think it's like mid 2000s, called Inside the Security Mind by Kevin Day, where he talks about it from not only looking at building out the playbooks, but understanding how to think about this, what you're going to apply and how to apply it, and then how to monitor and manage that. So it's like I said, it is an older book, but the principles really help in those type of scenarios.
Yeah. So what I put on the screen is like, again, get these two files if you can. Leave it up on here on the screen.
I provided the link in the chat for them on the first
one. Awesome.
I wasn't able to get the second one, but I got
it. Okay. So here's the second one. So this is really good stuff to help with those kind of playbooks and stuff, especially around this one, especially around the commercial espionage, because we've seen a lot of the quote commercial espionage. It's like, how do you vet your employees? How are they hired? How many times, you've heard of, oh, this is an insider and they were selling information, like the guy from, Google trying to, grab that information from Whammo and sell it to Uber, where he was offered a job. Now they were working in cahoots, and that's the biggest thing. But notice they were caught because of the monitoring software that they had was able to nail them down and say, okay, why would this person copying 14,000? It doesn't fit their job description, for sure. I actually worked a lot of insider threat for some government agencies, some manufacturing, we'll call it that. And on that, I mean, I got down to the point to where in between buildings, I could time how long it took to walk between buildings. And I know that Joe couldn't be logged in at building A and then all of a sudden 20 seconds later log into building B, because I knew it took 3 minutes. And we just had it set up in the sim. We could look at the login times between two and says, okay, if it falls under this threshold, guess what? Raise a red flag, start my playbook, start my investigation.
That's awesome. Someone in one of the comments said was following up on the previous question about bringing in law enforcement. And the question is, Annie is asking, referring back to Anand's question, if you bring in law enforcement before a company is aware, would the company get upset? Or maybe it doesn't matter if they do?
It all depends. I've seen it both ways. I've seen companies get very upset. Oh my God, you know, this person's going to is malicious to my company. It's like, no, I want to protect the data, right? I want to, if my data has been breached, I want to know about it. But the thing here that's really hurt the industry is you've had companies that have you know, put it under the rug, so to speak. They didn't want to get their name out in the news. They didn't want to get that. But I think it's got to come to a point, especially now. We're seeing a bunch of it. And don't worry about hurting someone's feelings. If you've gotten your data stolen, yes, report it to the company, report it to law enforcement, because you just never know. You don't want it, you know, swept under the rug, because we've seen lots of companies do that, unfortunately, because they think it's going to save their reputation. I think the companies that are out there in front saying, hey, something got messed up, you know, this is what got stolen, we're doing something about it. Thank you, Joe, for turning this in. That was awesome. That's how they should react. But you know, you can see over the last 10 years, they haven't. You've had lots of companies go, nope, you're a whistleblower. You're not a whistleblower. We're going to go after you. There was an incident, what is it, about a year and a half ago, state government, basically a pen tester found a hole in a government website and reported it. And even though they had a quote bug bounty program, they're like, oh, nope, he was a malicious person. He was trying to hack us. And he didn't do anything. All he did was report, hey, this has got a cross-site scripting issue. Y'all need to do something about it and fix it. I mean, they tried to take this guy to court. They tried to get him arrested, all this other stuff. And they finally, the government had to back off because everyone in the industry was like, no, this guy didn't do anything wrong. He found a hole. He told you about it, and you didn't want to do anything about it because they look bad. You know, it was egg in their face.
Yeah, that's awesome. See if we got any more questions in the pool here. One was asking, where can I get access to the slides? I think you already mentioned if they tweet you or ping you, you'll get that out to them.
Yeah, I also have a PDF sent by Wednesday up to B-Sides as well. So we'll be able to get these. I believe you're going to have it on the site after the conference is over.
We'll be publishing it on our YouTube channel. So the link to the B-Sides Vancouver YouTube channel is in the chat for anyone who wants it. Make sure you subscribe to that. And after the event is completed and we get some downtime to get this all together, we'll publish it up on the YouTube channel as well. So.
Yep, perfect. Yep, and I'll have the PDF ready for you. Excellent.
Last chance, everybody. You got any final questions? Now's the time. Well, while they're looking at that and sending us any more questions, I just want to thank you very much. It's awesome. I always love hearing about the different types of threats from the insider side, and, you know, stats be gone. You know, at the end of the day, you can look at things. I look at great examples, even at state level, with things like Stuxnet and just the complexity of trying to get over air gap networks and trying to get in organizations. And, you know, you sharing the one about Tesla, I always laugh at that one. It's awesome that the Tesla employee had the moral fortitude to not take $500,000 to plug in a USB stick, right? But it's coming more and more. Ransomware gangs are sharing in the wealth with any employee that's willing to get there. And when I think about things like, you know, like the rubber duckies and the OMG cables and just how easy these payloads are getting to be able to be deployed physically in these organizations, it really comes down to your people. But then I get back to, you know, the conversation we we're talking before about, well, why are we allowing people who don't need that kind of privilege to be able to have this stuff pivot into these other areas? I think Mubix's point during his keynote about things like make sure every laptop or every desktop is being treated as its own container, its own isolation, that helps. It's not going to solve everything. But if we assume breach and assume people are going to plug in hostile sticks, I think we would be in a much better place as a people.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's funny. Everything you mentioned, I have in my bag sitting next to me.
Yeah, I have it too. Right, like we have a lot of fun just going to the coffee shop and just playing around with, especially the new OMG stuff. It's just phenomenal. Just even on data exfiltration off of these cables. So it's just amazing what can be done when we're talking physical for this kind of stuff.
I mean, you have to think, you know, that I have got so many tools and stuff or software that I've written in scripts and whatever to break into networks. Just imagine what, and I'm just a lone person, the nation state stuff. Of course, you brought up Stuxnet, and you know, I've got it in my lab. It's crazy. Even today, that stuff is super scary. So.
Well, you look at the payloads that are, you know, Darren, the stuff he's doing over at Hack5, like some of the stuff on his GitHub repo and the way they're now, you know, providing prizes for some of the best payloads. These payloads are getting so much more sophisticated and have way more capabilities. It's not just a matter of being able to type in a few keystrokes to get some interesting things. We're talking about full interpreter backdoors in a matter of a couple seconds. And, you know, state actors are going to be able to take that to the next level. So great to be scared, but it's also the back to this is where the blue team's got to do a better job of making sure that they're going to assume that these type of things are hitting. What are they doing about it?
Yeah, and I'll definitely leave my final 2 cents here is visibility, visibility, visibility. If you don't have the visibility, you're not going to catch anybody. And that's what I want blue teams. You know, when I go in and try to, you know, I'm on the red team and I love being on the blue team because I love trying to throw off the red teams that are trying to attack me. But it's getting that visibility. And that's the very first thing I talk to customers about, or clients that I'm talking to is like, guys, you can throw all this technology at it, but guess what? If you don't have that visibility, you're not going to see that threat. You're just not, and you're going to lose every single time.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks again. We're coming up to our time. We're getting ready for our next session. Appreciate everything that you've done. Great talk. I'm looking forward to seeing more from you, and hopefully we'll see you next year again at B-Sides and another awesome talk about this kind of thing.